Good morning. I am Steve Weber. Welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show. The American Gumption Morning Show showcases ordinary individuals living extraordinary lives. And the reason that we like to focus on the ordinary, extraordinary is because we believe the world needs more positivity and encouragement and enlightenment. So, and I also happen to believe that everybody's both ordinary and extraordinary. So anyway, the goal of this show is to help people who want to awaken, and then to help those awakened folks and you live your life with gumption. So welcome to today's show. Today is Thursday, July 15th. It's show number 203. And I have a monologue prepared, and the name of the monologue is going to be Full Circle, because we're going full circle today. And so that'll come up in just a minute or two. And I have a guest, Scott Stanfield, who has not been on the show for almost 8 months, but he's coming back today after he went and had his own show for a while. So anyway, we'll catch up with Scott in just a couple of minutes. So let's see now. Tomorrow I plan to be here, although I don't have a guest confirmed. I'm doing an interview tomorrow afternoon, and that person will be my guest on either Monday or Tuesday, and that's Dr. Robin Alchin-Rise, and she is a PhD in psychology and has been doing this kind of work for 35 years, but about 20 years into it, like the whole world of neuropsychology changed, and she had her spiritual awakening at the same time. So we're going to have a great conversation. I've gotten to know her the last few weeks, and looking forward to that. So that'll be either on Monday or Tuesday that interview airs. And then next Thursday, Aaron Avila and Deborah Sweezy, and they have their own broadcast in their own community called Stroke TV, and it's all about people who are stroke survivors, and they feature these folks, and so it's very inspirational. And I'm looking forward to having that interview and learning more about both of them. All righty. So that's what's happening coming up. So let's see. The monologue, full circle. Are you ready? We're going to go full circle right here, right now. So full circle is an expression that means that we end up kind of back at the same place that we started out as. The dictionary definition says through a series of developments that lead back to the original source, position, or situation, or to a complete reversal of the original position, usually used with the phrase come full circle. So maybe it's like we end up back at the same place, but we certainly arrive there very differently than when we were originally there. So it's not like we come back as the same person, but we come back to a same kind of spot or position, but we have a very different perspective because time, learning, living life took place in the meantime. Alrighty, so now these circles can be big or small, and I'm measuring bigness or smallness by time. And so like imagine like a few weeks you come full circle, most likely you're working on some kind of a project. So it's not like a big huge thing, but you've been working on a project, you're digging in deep in it, and then suddenly you find yourself kind of back where you started out. Some kind of a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm back to where I was when I started this a few weeks ago. Or sometimes a circle could be kind of big and it might last for several years. And I'm thinking about like a friendship or some type of a relationship, someone you knew at one time and then reconnected them in a new or different way. And maybe there's like a belief or an epiphany that kind of brings you back there where you had a belief, but you drifted away from that belief. And then you suddenly kind of like revisit that belief a few years later, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like an aha moment that you might have. So now, what's that have to do with today? So back like in October of 2019, so coming up on almost 2 years ago, I left Montana in early October, took a couple weeks to drive across the country, ended up back in Pennsylvania, which I thought was only going to be a temporary couple of month thing. And then COVID hit, and I ended up just being in a nice, safe place, and grateful to family that's put up with me these last year and a half plus. And so anyway, I'm back at this spot and I'm in this safe place, but I wanted to start. And the reason why I shared that is because I left Montana with the intention of starting the American Gumption Show. And I didn't really didn't really know what I wanted it to be, other than the fact that I wanted to travel around the country, live in an RV, and meet interesting people and tell their stories, because I felt like the world needed more positivity and encouragement, and certainly wasn't getting that from the mainstream media. We're not getting that from the mainstream media today, so there's still this opportunity to do this. And anyway, what happened was so this is where I am when I get here. I'm thinking I'm gonna begin this show. So I wasn't here but a couple months, and not even 2 months, and I met a fellow on LinkedIn, Scott Stanfield, my guest today, and he said, "Hey, I've got this podcast going, and I'd like to interview you." And so we met and we talked a little bit, and then the next thing you know, we scheduled a time and did a broadcast with Scott. So let's see. So the reason why that was a pretty important thing for me at the time is it was really the first interview I had done since I left Montana. I took a little bit of time off after I first got here, and I went, I want to start a show. I want to be a broadcaster. And here's a guy reaching out to me, inviting me to be on his show. I had done many media things over the years and many different interviews, but knew I needed to, start out somewhere or get going somehow. So Scott invited me to be on his show, and I thought, hey, that's great. And we had a great time. We had a great conversation. We talked. It was the Restaurant GM podcast, I believe, is the name of the podcast. And hey, it was just a fun interview. I never worked as a restaurant GM, but I had worked for Bubba Gump for 15 years, and I saw quite a few restaurant GMs. And so, I had a front row seat into the world of restaurant general managers for 15 years. And it was quite, so it was fun to talk about it, Scott being an insider with the business and me being an outsider. All right. So now a few months go by, and Scott and I kept in touch. The world in the meantime shut down because of COVID, and turns out Scott ends up getting furloughed from his restaurant. The organization he was working for, the restaurant business, obviously everybody shut down. A lot of them shut down. A lot of them tried to maintain some kind of an out service, whatever, takeout thing. But that whole industry was decimated and more or less just came to a complete standstill. So then I started my broadcast in early August. So coming up on 1 year ago. About 6 weeks after I started my broadcast, I reached out to Scott again and said, "Hey, you want to be on the show?" And then he was on the show a couple of times, and he was a really good guest. And in the meantime, he had started a podcast, the Modern Longevitarian, and he was kind of doing both of these podcasts. And I said, "Hey, you ought to do a broadcast just like I was doing a broadcast." And he ended up partnering up with the same group I was with, and he started his own show, and he went on to do 100 shows, or just shy of 100 shows, and now I'm doing 200 shows. And so anyway, the full circle is that Scott and I are going to visit and talk about what he's doing today. He's back in the restaurant business on a full-time basis. He does have plans to continue his Modern Longevitarian broadcast or a podcast. And so he'll tell us about those plans. And so anyway, it's just kind of that full circle idea. And like I said, 18 months after Scott interviewed me on his podcast, he returns today, and we'll talk about what he's up to. So that's the full circle. That's the full circle monologue for today. I think, hey, I'm going to bring Scott on because he's a good guest, and we're a few minutes early, and that was a short monologue. So let's see if he's ready to join in on the fun here. Scott Stanfield, how are you?
Steve Weber. Wow. American Gumption morning show.
Here we are, man. Here we are. Show number 202.
202. Yeah. I think this is number 4 for me, right? I think it's number 4 for me on the live show.
Oh, yes. And in fact, I missed that in the monologue. Let's see. You were on, I have the dates here. You were on September 24th. October 8th and October 22nd last year. And it was really during those podcasts or those broadcasts that we started talking about, like, you should do your own show. It didn't start out that way. I just was like, we got you in a guest. But then But what I discovered when I was interviewing is because you went into Modern Longevitarian, it was like it really kind of aligned with what I was doing, and that, you want to take care of yourself. You want to have a better human experience. And being a Modern Longevitarian is like, all about taking better care of your physical body, which of course includes your spiritual and your mental part of it too. So anyway, it was just fun. And then you went and started the broadcast, and then you were busy. I couldn't get you as a guest for several months.
Right. Well, we both were doing, I don't know how many you're doing right now, but we were doing 5 a week, right? 5 shows.
Yeah.
And so that'll really, that's a full-time job when I was doing 3 interviews a week, 2 solo shows. So you're putting on 2 like solo monologues, and I'm a talker, right? So I'm like, I was doing hour-long like speeches, right? Just downloading lots of information, and then interviewing 3 people a week. I had one stretch I had 7 interviews in a row, right?
Wow.
Yes. And so like a Thursday, Friday, and then Monday through Friday the next week, it was intense, because when you want to research the guest and you think about that, it's like somebody may batch this out, right? If they're doing a podcast, they may do 2 or 3 a week or something like that. And then they have then they post them once a week. They got to do all the editing and things like that. This is like podcasting without a net, right? Because you're like live, there's no editing, there's none of those things. And so, by the way, you were on Restaurant General Manager Podcast, episode 2, right? So there's a trailer, then episode 1, then episode 2. And then I didn't really keep count of how many episodes I had in the very beginning of the live show. But you were on December 8th on 2020 of the Modern Longevitarian live show that was broadcast on LinkedIn and then YouTube. So you can go to my YouTube channel, Modern Longevitarian, and just click on video, go to the channel, click on videos, scroll down till you see Steve Weber's smiling face on there, and then you can watch us chat. It was a great show there, both of them actually, and both of them have a large amount of listens, and that was kind of the Restaurant General Manager was like my gift to the restaurant. So a lot of things that I had done, and so, but I haven't put anything on that in a long time. So.
So when we did the broadcast originally back in January of 2020,
right.
Then of course it was March when everything changes. It probably wasn't, when was it that you ended up not having a full-time restaurant job? When did you get furloughed? Was it right in March or was it April? How much time did they take before we're shutting the thing down?
Well, they didn't shut it down. They just got rid of the general manager, which was me, right? They furloughed me on March 22nd.
Okay.
And by the way, I failed to say, Steve, thanks for having me on. It's really such a pleasure. You reached out to me like 2 weeks ago, and I was busy. I didn't have Wi-Fi yet because I moved to Miami, and I'm all, as you can see, I'm pretty set up. I didn't realize that my friend Jason Teague, who was on the show, his thoracic mobility bar would be seen in the corner, but I tried to clean everything out of the back. Which is really a good stretching device. I use that almost every day. Really cool stuff. But say thanks again. So no, I was furloughed on March 22nd, and I'd only been in California for 9 months at the time. I was in Santa Monica, right across from the Santa Monica Pier, and it was a general manager of that restaurant that was super busy. Up to the most we did as a team, and because there's no way I could do this by myself, right? It was 1,100 covers on 4th of July, but we would average during the summer 600 to 900 people a day. About 20,000 people walk by that front door. As you can imagine, in California, you're dealing with a lot of craziness, right? Homeless people coming in and out of the back door, sitting in the dining room. You're having to, handle all that stuff. So just a crazy street corner to be the general manager of a restaurant on. So, but yeah, I got to answer your question, March 22nd, very early in the game. And it took me a little bit to get unemployment lined up because I wasn't really in the system, so to speak, there.
You probably hadn't ever collected unemployment in your life, I would guess, up until that point.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's different job to job. So anyway, you end up back in Utah, which is really where you have been living the last, 20 or so years, and that's where your family.
16 years, yep.
your family's there. So you end up back in Utah. And what I love about this, the next part of the story, is you didn't just like, I mean, I'm sure you took a little bit of a break and you caught your breath, but you didn't just sit around, wasting time or doing something silly. You put yourself to work, and then you ended up doing that broadcast that, was like a full-time job.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, the first 14 days I stayed in the spare bedroom. I was quarantined,
Okay.
Yeah. Remember those days, the quarantine days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I came, and so that was it. So I, did a lot of push-ups and it was good to see the family from a distance. And we only made it like 13 and a half days before my daughter just like ran in and like hugged me, and I hadn't seen her in a bit, and she was 12 at the time. And but then what happened was I was talking to my life coach, my dear friend Malia Brown. We were talking one day, and which she's been on the Modern Longevitarian podcast. She was episode 1 of that, and then she was also on the live show as well. And amazing person, and she amplifies peace in the world. She has a podcast called Amplifying Peace, or Peace Amplified, and just an amazing thing. She said, Scott, is because I was struggling, like, what do I do with the Restaurant General Manager podcast? Because I'm not in COVID, I'm not in it, right? I'm separated from it. So what do I do with it? And she said, Scott, you should do something with Modern Longevitarian. And for those who haven't heard the story about Modern Longevitarian, almost 10 years ago, I was 40 pounds overweight the second time. And what happened was that I was a director of food and beverage at Salt Lake Regional Medical Center, and they do a fair amount. They did at the time a lot of bariatric surgeries there. And I heard one of the doctors say, and one of the marketing people tell me, Matt Shannon actually said, Dr. Belknap said that weight loss is 70% diet. And I had lost 10 pounds over a month's time as I was turning 40 through just P90, doing P90X again for a month. It was killing me. At 40, it was a lot harder with the work schedule I had and the commute schedule and all those type of things that it was at age 35 when I did it and lost the weight the first time. And here I am. Somebody gifted me a diet book. It was called The Warrior Diet, talked about intermittent fasting. Nobody was intermittent fasting 9.5 years ago. Trust me, this was not, if they did it, it was on accident. It was like, oh, I'm running late. I grab a cup of coffee or whatever, and then run out the door, and then they go have a late lunch. But it was like, it wasn't like a conscious thing. Hey, today I'm fasting. Wasn't part of our vocabulary or vernacular or any of those things. And so I started intermittent fasting like that next week. And because I was a vegetarian, had been a vegetarian for a long time, I was a fat vegetarian. It was just so bad. And my blood pressure was low, but everything else was way off. Anyway, 1 month, I lost 10 pounds. First 7 days of doing a 20-hour underfeeding and a 4-hour overfeeding, I lost 7 pounds. 7 pounds in a week. And next thing you know, over a 10-month period, I got down to the lowest weight I'd been. I was age 40 then, that I'd been since college, right? When I started in the restaurant business, I was 157-pound athletic training PE major, right? And then at age 40, 19 years later, I'm a 202-pound fat vegetarian, right? Trying to figure that out. And then I started intermittent fasting. So one morning I'm working out. This is 9 years ago. I'm working out, and I get up and I said, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm a longevitarian. No idea where it came from. It's just like one of those gifts from the universe, from God, from whatever higher power you believe in, was just like implanted in my head. And I don't think we even have smartphones, and I'd had a BlackBerry before that, but this is like 9 years ago. I somehow searched longevitarian. I didn't know how to spell it, say it, none of those things. There's two things I found out. One is longevitarian was already taken and forwarded you to a website that talked about the blue zones. And number two, it was in a book in the 1860s, right? Talking about people who lived to be 100 years old. I noodled on it for a couple of days, and then I put Modern Longevitarian. Next thing I know, I buy Modern Longevitarian. I also own longevitarian.com now too. But for 9 years, I held that, or 8 years, or 9 years, I held that domain name, paid for it every year. And then when COVID hit is when I started, actually really bringing it to the world. I'd played around hashtagging it a little bit on Instagram, the year prior, 2018, 19. Got some little stickers made on, to go on my car and my, I'm the Modern Longevitarian. But that's how it came about. She said, Scott, you should do something with this. And that's how it started. And then I did your show, and we were talking backstage after the show, and you said, Scott, you just nailed that. You said you should do a live show, and that you apply for LinkedIn, talk to Spirituality Gone Wild. I did both those things, got approved for LinkedIn Live, and I was like, okay, what do I do with this? 5 days a week, did 98 shows.
Yeah, that's great. So it's interesting because, COVID changed everybody in some sort of a way. But, it's really been a good change for you because you're working full time in the restaurant business. You have this you have the Restaurant GM podcast that you're talking to people who are, in the business, and you're talking about that. And that's more or less going all along well. And then all of a sudden, you didn't feel like you could, wasn't like energetically working because you weren't working in the business. And so you weren't like motivated or I don't know what you were feeling, but it didn't feel right. And then, this thing that you had, been sitting there incubating for the last 10 years or 9 years is like suddenly, it's like, oh my gosh, let's just do that. And somebody has to say it. We always need a coach, or we always need someone or we don't always, but we often need someone to remind us or to point out what is the obvious thing, but we're so close, we don't even see it. And then you go start running with the Modern Longevitarian, and there it is right below, modernlongevitarian.com. The website, I'm sure, is still alive and well. And so anyway, you go off and you start running with it. And like you said, you did 100 shows and you interviewed a whole bunch of people along the way. So I think it's it's like kind of the making lemonade out of lemons kind of a situation. And it feels like you really found it. As I remember at the beginning of the year, you were suddenly getting, you're getting a kind of like feelers out there, like, hey, do you want to come lead this restaurant? And your heart is now like into the longevitarian. You feel like you're connecting, and at the same time, your earning power is with the restaurant business, and you and it becomes suddenly like it starts to feel different. Like, hey, the world's going to open back up, and I can go out there and get a job. And, so what was happening? Like what was the pull and, what was the yin and the yang, or the struggle at that moment in terms of making a decision on what you do next? Because, you were kind of at a crossroads there.
Right. And, it's really an interesting place to be, right? It's like when you start a business, no matter COVID or not, for you to do it full time, it's got to produce enough money for you to pay your bills, right, and have a little fun and go out to dinner or date night or something like that. And I had, so the business was profitable because I had 2 coaching clients, and I still have coaching clients now. And even though I'm the restaurant I'm working in, so I have coaching clients and those things. And so there's not a lot to do this business. Like, to put a podcast out is free. Right. You can go to anchor.fm, and you can, all you got to do is, if you figure out how to do your own graphics and things like that, you can pretty much figure out how to do it. I mean, I was gifted the microphone by somebody who I would have been a guest on their show, told them I wanted to do a podcast, and so for $100, you can like have some really like high end, podcasting equipment, and you can do this. I do all my stuff on a Chromebook. I don't even have a true laptop. Everything's on a little small Chromebook. And so you can even do it from your phone. But so anyway, what happened is that my unemployment expired on December 26, 2020. And so the money that I had coming in wasn't enough to, keep the base level, things going. And so I waited tables at my friend's Irish pub in Park City, Utah, and was a doorman there for a couple months. Helped a friend of mine out back in South Carolina. With his restaurant for a month. And then but I needed something that, and I interviewed at some really cool places in the area around Park City, Utah, that weren't perfect fits for me. Because the one thing I decided during COVID is that, and a lot of us have decided this, as you can see, as people are being asked to come back to the office, 40% of those are resigning, right?
Right.
And so I said, well, if I go work in the restaurant business again, I want to work for a company that's in alignment with who Scott Stanfield is. And Scott Stanfield is the restaurant general manager coach, and Scott Stanfield is also the Modern Longevitarian, but this all makes up who I am, right? And so I want to work for a company that, puts people before numbers. I want to look for a company that, is extremely professional, and they have a collective EQ that, and the leadership that is super high. They're looking for excellence and those type of things. And so those are all super important for me. And also, promotes living a healthy life at work and away from work. And so those are the things that I really was and still are looking for. And luckily I found it where I'm at, but I had to move across the country to Miami to do that. And so that was, but that's really important, because if you go work in a toxic environment, it's just like this, right? With our health, you may have, if your listeners may or may have not heard, and we talked about this all the time, because the pillars of the Modern Longevitarian is really about creating this environment for your genes to express themselves, which is the science of epigenetics, right? And so, hey, Laurie, how are you? Thanks for joining in. Sorry, Steve, I took over. I was the host for a second. Sorry. Yeah.
You're doing great. I'm loving this, because
right.
It's like a day off for me. I'm just, ask me if you have any questions, Scott, just let me know.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, no.
Hey, so let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Had you ever done that before, where you went, you know what, I know who I am, and I'm only going to go, I want to work for, this kind of a company? Was that the first time in your life when you really went, okay, this is what I stand for, and so now let's go find a job that aligns with that? Or had you more or less just kind of taken opportunities that maybe, sounded like, on paper they were good fits, but you hadn't necessarily judged it that way? So that's sort of the question.
Well, I think the beauty of COVID, a lot of people, look at 2020 as a year that they wish they could delete or do those type of things. But, the beauty of COVID has allowed us to really press the pause button. And if you took it and the time to actually really figure out who you are, find, for me, I found a ton of things, that for me and my family, that it really worked. And so was this the first time? This is the first time I actually did it. I consciously said, when you're interviewing me, I'm interviewing you, and I'm looking for a culture that matches and things like that. But like I said, there was this, for some reason, I'd drawn this line, down the middle, where it was like the longevitarian side of Scott is something I do outside of work, right? And what I do at work is the restaurant GM coach, right? Yeah, I intermittent fast when I'm at work, right? Because that's the only way that I could maintain my weight. I had to build some solid guardrails up that, when I show up to work at 10:30, when there's leftover, breakfast, in a hotel, from a banquet, that I don't go mowing on it, right? And be like, no, I don't eat anything until starting 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so, I had to build those guardrails up. So was I the Modern Longevitarian? Yes, but I didn't bring that. I didn't see that as the whole thing. So this is the first time that I really was like, I am going to be in alignment. I am in alignment with all of Scott when I find a job, the job that I take. And that was super important for me. And I think it's important for everybody. I did a podcast with a recruiter, and it was talking about career wellness. And what most people don't realize is that we could spend 70% of our time in stress, which is suffering, which is sympathetic nervous system. And when you're stressed, what happens is your health is stopped. Your hair stops growing, right? Your fingernails stop growing, because all energy is focused on survival,
Right.
Right. And so why would you want to live in that state all the time? Right.
Right.
So if you're working in an environment where if you don't do well when the boss yells at you, but you go take a job because it's $5,000 more than the last job you have, but you're going to have, hey, I'll deal with that yelling boss because I'll have a couple extra drinks when I get home, or I'll pop a couple extra pills, or, you know, whatever, right? Whatever you do to compensate for stress, right? That is not healthy. Or you can like remove the stress, right? But B, you got to learn how to restore from it. But yeah, anyway, so it's like about finding the right environment that you thrive in, even if it's not the most money. But if you find both, win.
Yeah.
Right?
The analogy of the stress and the flight or fight is the idea of the animal. We can learn from our animal friends, the kingdom. The deer is out there grazing in the pasture, eating grass, and then the lion or something comes along and chases it, and it runs like the Dickens, and it's like all of those stress hormones and everything gets activated to take care of the danger, and it outruns the lion. And then, 10 minutes later, it's like standing in the middle of the field eating grass, just nice and relaxed. It's not like saying, hey, did that lion insult me? Did he not think and humans have that ability to kind of rethink that whole thought process and go, gee, did the boss, is he out to get me? Is he, and then you see your friend and you say, you know what the boss did? And you relive that, and that stress hormones just keep playing over and over again. So, the advantage, the advantage we have is that we have the ability to remember and to think and to, replay things from our neocortex, the front brain, and then deer and other animals don't have that, but they don't remember it and they don't stress by it, so they just instantly relax and relieve those stress hormones and go back to a relaxed state. So learning how to do that, extremely important. Meditation or breathing or some of the other things you talk about from the modern longevitarian.
Here, so Steve, let me interrupt you for a second. See my shirt? I wore this shirt for a reason.
I love that.
So what happens is when we realize that we're emotional about something, right?
And Lori likes it too.
Yeah. Right. So let's think about this, right? And I'll give you a couple examples, right? All right. So the deer, right? Get chased by the lion, right? And what happened was that deer gets over that stress and goes back to parasympathetic or beautiful state, expansive state of being almost immediately, right? The danger's gone. I'm good, right? So let's go back and, oh, wait a minute, I'm hungry. Let's eat a little bit, or I got to poop, or whatever the deer does in that moment, right? All right. And, or goes, finds a stream and drinks some water. They get over it really quick. So Tony Robbins said he doesn't allow himself to be angry more than 5 minutes. Right. The author of the book called Positive Intelligence. He's a professor at Stanford. And if you have not heard of Positive Intelligence, or PQ, I encourage you to search that on YouTube and watch his TED Talk, watch his talk at Google. It's how I learned, by listening, or buy the book, right? Or you can go to positiveintelligence.com and take his test. Totally enlightening, because it tells you about your saboteurs, all right, and what we do to sabotage ourselves. But I'll get back to this. He says 1 minute. He goes, if you are upset about something more than 1 minute, you're emotionally hijacked. But here's what happens, Stephen. I know you're big into the law of vibration and all those type of things, and I am as well. Let's say that something happens. The boss jumps on us, or husband or wife or whoever, somebody pulls out in front of us, and and when we go recant that story with that high level of emotion to our friend or our neighbor or someone who gives us all the oh, it'll be all right, right? We're putting that vibration and all those emotions back in the world all over again. We're recreating that again. But if you get over it within that minute or 5 minutes, and you don't ever tell that story again, and you don't ever talk about it again, you move past it. You're like the deer grazing after it's escaped the lion, right? So it's about having this ninja level self-awareness of what your state is, right? And realizing when you are emotional, because 100% of the time, if we're suffering, if we're stressed, it's all about our thinking. Our thinking took us there 100% of the time. And when you realize it, you got to get over it. Now, okay, people are like, how do you get over it, right? Well, you're like, well, if my thinking brought me here, right? And this is from David Baer. I love his work, right? If your thinking brought you here, what if the opposite's true? Okay. Oh, what if my boss is out to get me, or, oh, that's what I'm thinking, right? But if it's my boss is here to help me succeed, right? And he's asked a question, but I'm only filtering this through my own list, through my own perspective, through my own fear of those type of things. Well, I think of the opposite. My boss is here to help me succeed at my job, right? This is what happened to me, right? So biblically speaking, Jeremiah 29:11, God has plans for you to prosper and not to harm you, right? You get furloughed, 9 months later, your unemployment runs out. You humble yourself and go wait tables, right? You know, and then, you know, you do all these different things, right? You have some weeks or months that no money comes in, right? Plans for you to prosper, right? Will provide, right? And did provide. So what happens is that allows you to go, you know what? I can take the time to find the job that is in alignment with who I am as a person and what I believe in, and that I can thrive in and I can help other people thrive in. So anyway, the first thing is, if you get these two down, right? The first one is that there's three type of levels of awareness. People who just unaware of what's happening. They're just emotionally hijacked and they don't even realize it. They don't even know what happened, right? And that's probably 89% of the population. Then there's 10% that are aware, but do nothing with it. They're like, I know, but then they just allow it to keep going on. They allow the anxiety to keep coming, the depression and those type of things, right? And this is all internal. You can't, the solutions are all internal. They're not external. You can't take a pill for this. You can't, you know, maybe change your diet and change your mood some or things like that. But it's you know, get some sleep and elevate your mood, you know, those type of things. But then there's people like us. There's probably less than 1% of the population is actually outside the jar, as Joe Dispenza would say, looking back at what, you know, programs are playing inside of us, what emotions are playing with those type of things, and then have the tools to regulate themselves back to their inner sage, their inner Jedi, their true self, right? That doesn't have the emotion there that's influencing them or the pre-programmed things that are in there. And so it's if you become an awareness ninja about where you are on a moment by moment basis, right? Then you can get over it, right? You can get over it. All right.
Hey, rather than have me ask a question, I'm going to let Lori ask a question. She wants to know, when a person has left a toxic employment situation, abusive bosses, and you're seeking a new job and they ask for your resume, you know, how do you tell the reason for your past toxic jobs? How do you frame something like that in a way that allows you to powerfully move forward?
Well, I think honesty, you know, is where it is, right? I worked for a place. I worked there for 5 months, and it's the only, you know, job as a restaurant manager that I didn't work at for a minimum of 3 years. And so when people ask me why you left, I'm like, I couldn't work in that culture. It was too toxic. I got yelled at by the boss. I was there 6 weeks. I got blamed for something that happened, you know, 3 years ago. It was just a toxic environment that I didn't want to be a part of. I think 10 years ago, you couldn't say that. Right? Because then you looked upon negatively because, oh, when you come to work here, right, you're going to be a complainer, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, they're going to label you, you're going to be those type of things. And if somebody hasn't hired me because I said that, then I don't want to work for them.
Right.
Right. And so I think just be honest. It's like I left because it was a toxic environment. If they ask you to explain it in the most professional way that you possibly can in an interview. Right. And it's like, what, you know, you could say, oh, well, I took this job for more money. Which may be true, or I took this job because it was closer to home. That may be true. But, you know, it's like this establishes in the interview that culture is important to you, and the culture that you work in is important. But back what I was saying earlier, epigenetics is your health span is determined by the environment, which allows your genes to express themselves. And I came up with this term I called epi-employees, is the environment that allows the employees to express themselves in a positive or negative way. So if you have a toxic environment, you're going to create cancer and diabetes and those type of things for your body. If you have a toxic environment at work, you can create chaos and anger and emotions and poor customer service and those type of things. Positive environment, increased health span, right? You're going to, live to be, strong for longer. Or you're going to, if you have a healthy environment at work, you're going to create great customer experiences, great employee experiences, which is probably more important than the guest experience, to be honest, right? Everybody's going to be happy, less stressed, going to have fun at work. You're going to make more money. All those type of things are going to happen.
Yeah, I like that idea that if we focus on taking care of the employees, then as opposed to taking care of the guest and having the employees stressing out about taking care of the guest, but if you're focusing on training people and creating systems that allow employees to operate at a high level, then the benefit, the roll-off is going to be great customer experiences.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. Well, who are my customers? Who do I talk to more than anybody as a, higher, a manager of a restaurant? I don't talk to every guest that comes in the door unless I'm working a position. The other night, we have, I was at the host stand all night. So I talked to everybody that came in the front door, almost everybody. Let's say 99% of the people came in the front door. Some people may have gone to the bar and, I didn't get to talk to them because I was, whatever. But most of the time, my engagement is with the team.
Yeah.
Right. Those are my guests. They're in my house. Right. I'm hosting them at my house. So I'm in the hospitality business. So what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to be hospitable to them. How are you today? What can I help you with? What do you need spoons. You need Demitas spoons. You need plates, right? How can I get you what you want, what you need to do your job on a high level, right? So I treat them as my guest, right? And then they in turn have all the tools that they need to do their job, and they feel supported and they're able to do their job on a high level. So what happens if you have a disgruntled guest that has to wait an hour for their steak and they get it and it's overcooked. We are kind to them and we get them what they want. We resolve the issue. We listen to them. We express empathy. All right. Like I said, we resolve it. We delight them. We do those type of things. When somebody comes in and they don't like their schedule, you're like, suck it up. It's your job to get that shift covered. It's yours, right? Not my problem anymore. It's your problem. What if we listen to them and empathize with them and resolve the issue, right? And delight them. Your work environment changes, right? Therefore, your guest experience changes, right? That's the whole thing.
I want to ask two questions. We're going to shift the conversation a little bit. The people you interviewed during your show, you learned from them, just like I'm learning from them. The question is kind of like, what did you learn from them? And then relate that to how you used contacts to end up interviewing, and I think you either ultimately or directly or indirectly ended up with the job that you have now, from the broadcast. So just kind of talk about the idea of talking to people on a regular basis as a broadcaster and how that opens up new doors. And then, what was the process like when you were actually, getting connected with the organization you're with now?
Well, I would say this, right? There's so much, so many great contacts in our LinkedIn, connections. Now, granted, I have 30,000 LinkedIn connections, so it's a little bit different for me than it would be for someone who, when I started out really trying to build my LinkedIn profile, would add 3,200, right? But there are probably 6 or 7 of those interviews that I did that were just in my LinkedIn contacts, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's probably another 10 that were connections with those people, right? They were like second degree contacts with me on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, so what did I learn? Oh my gosh, this is wow. How much time do you have, Steve? We're going to do one of these Rich Roll 2-hour podcasts, right?
We'll have you back to go deeper on that, but just give us relate it to how, as you started searching for a job, how it benefited you and how the broadcast, that you had and the skills and the connections you had, how that helped you, go that way.
Well, I think there's a couple things, right? One is that I became a better speaker because I spoke every day for months, right? So I became calmer in the moment, right? When I was nervous, because when you're interviewing some people who like I think of Sean Wells, right? I think of Josh Perry, pro BMX, racer that's been on like Bulletproof Radio. Prash Ketcha, who's been on Real London with Brian Rose, and I think of some of these people who've been on, like have huge impact and they have big social media followings and been interviewed by people who have a lot bigger shows than I have, right? And I was like, that taught me is like to show up as my inner Jedi, to show up as Scott Stanfield, not to show up as a nervous version of that or emotional version or what if this goes wrong version, things, not an anxious version of me, but my true self. Right. That was the first thing. By putting myself in the ring, in the arena, it taught me that when I did interviews with people, so it also taught me this, right? So I had to interview with a celebrity chef to get the job that I have. So they always ask you at the end of the interviews, like, do you have any questions? Well, I prepared my questions as if I was going to interview him on my show, my podcast, my show, those type of things. I literally had an hour's worth of questions written out. All right. But it gave me comfort, right? It gave me that I had the questions, right? It then gave me the ability to pick and choose the questions based off because an interview is this, right? I give you some information and then you can go, okay, I like that. Let's talk about that and carry that on. Right.
Right.
So it gave me like all these ways. So that was one thing. It's like, I really prepared, like, to ask them like about a story, right? How he got started in the restaurant business, right? What's the difference? What does he like about being on the Food Network, right? What about his first restaurant? What's the next plan? How many more restaurants does he have? What's missing from the restaurants, right? What's his favorite food? What's his favorite wine pairing? Those type of things. I could ask those type of things, right? So preparing. So one, I was a better speaker. Two, to how to really prepare for an interview, right? Number three, and then and also I just the comfort level to be me and to show up as me. Now I'm big into alter egos. We haven't talked about this a lot. Todd Herman has a great book called Alter Ego, and I have an alter ego that I said I'm and so I show up as that, right? And I recently started, as we talked about this, and I started taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu, mm-hmm. right? And I'm 49 years old and I'm showing up and there's a lot of young bucks in there and they're throwing people around and there's rolling and all those things going on. And, age is a number, right? But also at the same time, it's like, how do you show up to that? So when I'm driving there, I say, I am a black belt. That's my alter ego. I'm a black belt alter ego, right? And so act like you are. And so how would a black belt show up versus a white belt? How would a true general manager of a celebrity chef restaurant at one of the most iconic hotels in the world, probably this on Miami Beach, how do you show up to that interview? And how do you show up after that interview, right? So what do you need to do to show up? And that's and so basically you're asking those questions is like, who am I? Who is this person? And who am I? And how does that fit together? And how do I show up as that? But yes, one of my connections through LinkedIn did help me like kind of get my foot in the door, with the group that I'm with now. But I'd also had chatted with the president of the company on LinkedIn about one of the podcasts he was a guest on, and so those type of things, right? That are there. And so I got asked about my podcast in the interview process, like which one episode would you recommend I listening to? Right. And I gave him two. I gave him one from the Restaurant General Manager podcast. Right. And I gave him one from the Modern Longevitarian. So
so Lori asked another question, and I'm not going to put it up, but the idea is that the whole vax thing is out there, and jobs are dependent on whether or not you have been jabbed. And so some people have decided that it's not a good thing for them, and we'll just allow everybody to make their own choice on what's the right thing for them. So because this is, we advertise it as kind of a post-COVID, anxiety and helping people, and we only have a few minutes left. like let's just talk about some of the things that you've observed as you've gone back into the business and how the world has changed, and fears that are out there, whether real or created artificially or whatever they are, but it affects people's ability to function in the world today. So related to maybe, you come back into this restaurant, you're an established restaurant, it's up and running. What would you say to somebody who's, just nervous about today's time we're living in, and maybe related to the way you've, worked with the people that you've were introduced, because you're the new guy, right? Everybody's standing there looking at you, and it's like, okay, what do you got, mister? I don't think I like you,
Right. Well, normally 33% don't like you, 33% do, and 33% don't care. They're neutral, right? And so there's going to be people who don't like you, and and that creates some turnover in the beginning, and some conflict in the beginning, because those people may have liked the previous, management team, before that. And so that's really a tough thing. So, post-COVID, right? Well, you have to think about this. When I worked at the hospital as a director of food and beverage, it was mandatory to have the flu shot. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't like that job, because it forced me to do something that I didn't believe it. Because you end up getting sick a lot working in hospitals anyway, especially if you're stressed out and have a low immune system. The first year, you get sick a lot as well. When it comes to, here's an interesting thing, Steve. I have been to a lot of Whole Foods places. You think I eat organically most of the time, pasture raised, grass fed, grass finished, those type of things, right? And you go into a Walmart, you go into an auto parts store, you go into a Publix, you see hardly anybody wearing a mask, right? You go into a Whole Foods where the healthiest people are supposed to be, and there are more people wearing masks in a Whole Foods than there are any other spot. So I wrote down something yesterday. I said, do healthy people stress over their health too much? Right? And so again, if you look at like if you have a strong immune system, right, then trust in your immune system. I'm not saying get the vaccine, not get the vaccine, because I'm not, any of those type of things. This is all a personal decision. But, I know, a very few jobs that require them to get the vaccine, right? A hospital I would imagine that would be it, right? Because that's how it was with the flu shot when I worked there. But if a job is requiring somebody to get a vaccine, then I would say that's not a culture that I would work for, right? That's not in alignment with my beliefs, right? I'm a firm believer in, there's a philosopher from France, Voltaire, is one of the philosophers in which our country was built upon. It says, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, your immune system is your vaccine given by God. Yeah. So it is true. Right. So we have to do things to strengthen our immune system. The biggest thing we can is what we talked about is manage our stress, right. And build restoration pieces in there to help offset our stress. Right. And I know we only got a couple minutes. Let's talk this for a second. Right. Stress can be stress, or stress can be a hormetic stress. Right. And there's environmental stresses and there's molecular stresses. Like if you listen to, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, she's going to tell you to grow broccoli sprouts and eat those as much as possible to get as much sulforaphane in your system. But when you listen to the author of this book, Paul Saladino, The Carnivore Code, right? He's going to say that sulforaphane is a toxic. It's a toxin that actually causes your liver to produce more glutathione, which is the master antioxidant by the liver. Well, his thing is why do you have to take sulforaphane to cause your body to create it when you could actually you don't need the toxin in the first place, right? You see, so what happens is that if we can't, and so what happens is, like for instance, Wim Hof, cold showers, going ice baths and those type of things, it's not about the cold. It's about how your body responds to the cold. It's not about the sulforaphane. It's about how your body responds to the toxin that creates a glutathione. It's not about your exercise, right? You exercise. It's about how your body responds to the exercise. You can exercise in a way that causes your muscles to get really big. You can exercise in a way that causes your muscles to get really fast. It's about the response to the stress. And so what happens is we have mental stresses, we have environmental stresses, we have all those things. So what can you do to turn that stress into something that is a rebound effect, that you are stronger mentally or physically or spiritually than before the stress happened? And so what can you do? Meditation is a good place to start for the mental side of things, right? You may need to stretch. If you worked out really hard or walked too far or walked a long way, stretching is a good way to do restoration. And stretching may be your only workout that particular day, right? Or you may need to journal to get the mental stresses out, or those type of things. So the way to recover is rest, relaxation, and sleep. And so the importance of an evening routine is, I wrote this yesterday too. It's like, the evening routine is the new morning routine, right? And that's what my whole book on sleep, if you go to my website, which Steve's got down there, but you can also get there by going to strongforlonger.com, and it'll forward you to it, and you'll have a pop-up, and you can get this book on sleep. It'll help you sleep one of two ways. It'll be so boring, you'll fall asleep, or number two, right? Number two, it'll give you these 7 steps to build an evening routine, so to speak, so you actually can get the best sleep possible and then take off and fly again the next day.
The biggest thing I've noticed in my own life the last year is my breathing. I've become very much more conscious of my breathing. And during this show, there's probably been 10 different times when I caught myself right in the midst of a deep breath, and I became aware of it, and I just let it when that happens, I take a little bit deeper than I would have done just by not thinking about it. And then, through that exhale, allow myself to kind of to settle down. And I remember I learned that while I was waiting for my computer to do something that was taking longer than I wanted to. And I could the option was to, get mad about it or to breathe in. So, and I know that breathing is one of the pillars of being a modern longevitarian. So with that, I'm going to give you the very last word, and then we're going to wrap up because I got to get out of here right at 11 today. So.
Okay. Well, breathing is so important. And, there's 3 styles of breathing. There are an upshift, there's a neutral, and then there's a relaxing breath. Lucas Rockwood he calls it coffee, whiskey, and water, right? Or coffee, water, and whiskey. We'd need a lot of water. So a 4x4 box breath where you breathe, inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And you do that 2 or 3 times, and that will help just balance you, just like water does. If we have whiskey, you have a couple whiskeys at night. And hey, Nicole, thanks for joining in. And Frankie, thanks for all the comments. But we only have a couple whiskeys, so that's what. So you would do a 4-7-8, which Dr. Wheel made that famous, right, for helping to send a tranquilizer to your nervous system. And then a Wim Hof style, or even Hickson Gracie, who is the jiu-jitsu fighter that, from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, he talks about controlling your breath, right, as well, even in the chaos, calmness in the chaos. So breath is something that can be an automatic and get crazy, right? And we start breathing through our mouth, right? But then it also could be something we can shift over into sport manual, and you can, you can take control over that and really, be conscious about your breathing. And you're right. I do that walking through dining rooms of restaurants when I'm working. I do that driving down the road. I do that conversations with my wife. I do that, and you can do it silently. It doesn't have to be this big thing, right? It could just be just a conscious inhale through your nose. Breathing through your nose is the most important piece of the puzzle. If you can't breathe through your nose, you need to work on, whatever's blocking that. Steve, I take my mouth shut when I close, and I have for over almost 3 years now, over 2 years, where I take my mouth closed when I sleep to force me to breathe through my nose.
Scott, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll have to have you come back again. This was fun. Thank you so much.
Man, Steve, I love it. I love you, man. Thanks for
Scott
having me on.
Stanfield, the Modern Longevitarian. There's his website down there. Go check him out. Get his free book, right? You got the free book offer still up there. You can, the sleep book, and I love it. So, hey, man, thanks. This was a lot of fun. We'll see you again. We won't wait 8 months to bring you back to the show.
I got some time during the day. We'll be happy to do it.
All righty, man. Well, thanks a lot. Take care. See you next time.
All right. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you, Scott, for joining us. As I said, I've got another thing I got to run to, so I'm going to just shut this program down. Next week, we have Dr. Robin Olchin-Rise, and Aaron Avila and Deborah Sweezy with Stroke TV. So they're both going to join us. So that's it. We'll see you next show.